So, you want to own a Renaissance casino. First, picture chandeliers, masked nobles leaning over card tables, gold coins changing hands under painted ceilings. Here's the part that romantic picture always leaves out. 1774. The Great Council of Venice votes to shut this business down for good. This is the very government that invented it, voting on a motion from a reformer named Giorgio Pisani. 136 years of legal gambling in Venice ends in a single afternoon. So many of the city's own nobility ruin themselves that the state which built the tables is the one tearing them out. The cards were never the business, the license was. Let's kill the shadowy den image first, because it's completely wrong. This wasn't some vice the authorities grudgingly tolerated in a back alley, waiting for an excuse to shut it down. The Venetian government built this on purpose in 1638 and put its own name on the door. By this point, Venice isn't the trading power it used to be. The spice routes that made the Republic rich for centuries have shifted out to the Atlantic, past Venice. A state that once grew fat on Mediterranean commerce is looking for new sources of revenue wherever it can find them. Gambling, it turns out, is one of the few businesses that never goes out of fashion. Gambling is already everywhere in the city before that. In taverns, in private rooms, technically illegal and completely unstoppable. The Republic has tried banning it outright more than once, the way governments usually start. Enforcement falls to the Council of Ten, Venice's own secret state security body, feared across Europe for policing everything from treason down to ordinary vice. Even the Council of Ten can't make this one stick. Every ban fails the same way. People keep playing, the games move somewhere the law can't see them, and the state collects nothing from them. Unlicensed gambling rooms breed something worse than lost revenue. Fights break out over cheating, tempers run high with that much money and that much drink in one place. And disorder like that is the kind of thing the Council of Ten exists to stamp out. The Great Council looks at that mess and does the one thing governments are usually best at. It doesn't ban the thing, it licenses it. One official venue, one legal address. Every ducat that moves through it becomes a ducat the state can finally see, instead of one it only ever hears rumors about. They call it Il Ridotto, Italian for a small private room. The name undersells it almost immediately, since nothing about what happens inside stays small for long. And within a decade, the word means one very specific kind of room to half of Europe. It opens inside Palazzo Dandolo, a patrician palace just off Piazza San Marco, near the Church of San Moise. 11 rooms of it running every carnival season for the better part of 6 months a year. Within a generation, it's not a shameful secret anywhere in Europe, and every royal court on the continent knows what happens behind those particular doors. It's a destination. Foreign princes plan their travels around it. Contemporary travelers describe the city as bursting at the seams every carnival, lodgings impossible to find, canals crowded with visitors from across the continent. No historian has ever nailed down an exact head count. But every account agrees on the same thing. Thousands of foreigners washing into a city that only holds a few 100,000 residents, all chasing the same 6 months of licensed anonymity. Venice already has a head start nobody else in Europe can match. Carnival here means months of licensed anonymity, masks worn openly in the street, rank and reputation temporarily suspended by custom long before the Ridotto ever opens its doors. Drop a state-run gambling house into a city already primed for that kind of anonymous mixing, and you don't need to build a tourist attraction from nothing. You need only to open the door. Notice what the government didn't do here. It didn't invent gambling, and it didn't even invent the private gaming room. Small, informal card rooms called casini already exist all over the city, tucked into the ground floors of palaces, technically illegal and completely ignored. What the Ridotto does is take that existing appetite and put a single door on it, a door the state can watch. And it only opens for 6 months of the year, the carnival season running from early autumn through to Ash Wednesday. Whatever this business earns, it has to earn it in half the calendar, then sit completely dark until the next carnival season begins. So what does it cost to get into this business? Here's the honest answer. No renovation bill survives, no clean ledger of what it costs to turn a nobleman's palace into a casino. What survives instead is a much stranger barrier to entry, and it isn't money at all. You cannot simply buy your way into running a table at the Ridotto. The law requires that only a Venetian patrician, a member of the nobility, can hold a bank. Venice keeps a register of who qualifies, the Golden Book. the official role of every family recognized as patrician. By the 18th century, that book held something like 200 family names out of a city of somewhere around 130 to 150,000 people. That's the whole pool. Every single person legally allowed to hold a bank at the most famous casino in Europe has to trace back to one of roughly 200 surnames. Picture checking that register for your own name. If it isn't there, no fortune you spend a lifetime building ever buys you a seat at that table. Blood does. That single rule shapes everything else about how this entire business runs, right down to who ends up carrying the risk and who never does. So, who's working the floor? Venice has an entire class of nobles who are patricians in name only. Too poor to dress the part, too poor to hold real political office, but still legally barred from most ordinary trades without disgracing the family name. They're called Barnabati, after the parish of San Barnaba, where many of them live. For a Barnabato, holding a bank at the Ridotto is one of the only jobs left that doesn't cost him his rank. The state doesn't pay him a wage. He stakes his own money as the bank and keeps what he wins. There are many men like him, more than the Republic would probably like. Venice's patrician class has grown large and unequal over the centuries, and by the 18th century, a real share of it is barely solvent, propped up by a noble surname and not much else. In the Great Council itself, the Barnabati are numerous enough to matter as a voting bloc, and poor enough to be seen by wealthier patricians as a problem the Republic has never quite solved. They can be bought, flattered, or organized into blocks by whoever bothers to court them. That's a standing headache for a government that would rather its nobility stay both loyal and comfortably out of debt. A bank at the Ridotto is one of the few places that problem quietly pays for itself. There's a real cost to failing at it, beyond the money. A patrician family's whole social standing rests on being seen to keep up appearances. A Barnabato who loses his stake in public loses it in front of the people whose good opinion still matters to the rest of his family. The bank isn't just his money. It's the last visible thread connecting a poor branch of the nobility to a rich one. Here's the detail that tells you everything about how seriously Venice takes this arrangement. Every patron inside the Ridotto is required to wear a mask, the bauta, standard for Venetian carnival. The Barnabati are the one group explicitly exempt. They have to be visible. The government wants anonymous nobles free to lose fortunes without public shame, and it wants the men taking their money to be identifiable if anything ever needs sorting out. Anonymity for the players, accountability for the house, and the law draws that line deliberately, not by accident. Now, what's being staked at these tables? Picture the room these numbers are about to move through before you hear a single one of them. The most popular game is Basetta, a card game somewhere between blackjack, poker, and gin rummy. Players bet against the banker's deck on which cards come up and in what order. Win, and the bank pays you 60 times your original wager. Stake a single zecchino, the standard Venetian gold coin, and a win pays back 60 of them. That coin holds about 3.5 grams of nearly pure gold, worth about $230 today, just in the metal. 60 of them back on one hand is close to $14,000 in today's money, for a single winning bet. The other big draw is Biribi, closer to a lottery. Players pick one number out of 70. The winning number is drawn in front of the whole room so nobody can quietly claim the bank cheated them. A winning number pays 64 times the stake. Do the maths on that, and the bank keeps about 8.5% of every single zecchino wagered, averaged out over enough rounds played. 64 zucchini back on a single winning number is close to $15,000 in today's gold value. Giacomo Casanova spends plenty of his own life inside this exact room, and he describes it in detail. Masked nobles bend low over the cards, hot chocolate cooling at their elbows, gloved hands moving between the deck and each other. Nobody's face is visible except the banker's. You could be sitting across from a prince, a merchant's wife, or a fellow gambler twice your age. The bauta covering everyone's features means rank barely matters at the table itself, only the coin in front of you. In 1708, Frederick IV, King of Denmark, actually does sit down at one of these tables, masked like everyone else. He walks away having won a substantial sum. For one night, a reigning European monarch is just another bauta in the room. Venice's own doges play here too, more than one of them across the decades, named in Venetian sources as regulars, rather than one-off visitors. The elected head of the Republic gambles inside a building his own government built to profit off that habit. Picture the layers stacked on top of each other in that single fact. The head of state, sitting at a table his own state licenses, wearing a mask his own state requires, losing or winning money his own state taxes on the way out the door. Casanova isn't the only one taking notes. Playwrights and painters turn the Ridotto into raw material too. Carlo Goldoni mining it for stories, Francesco Guardi, Pietro Longhi, and Giambattista Tiepolo, all making it a recurring subject on canvas. That's not just cultural color. A gambling floor doesn't get immortalized by half of Venice's working artists unless the money moving through it is genuinely spectacular. Some of those Guardi paintings hang in major museums today, meaning you can stand in front of the actual room this video is describing, 4 centuries later, without ever leaving a gallery. Casanova describes something else too, a habit that tells you how seriously Venice takes the theater of the place. Lose everything downstairs, and the night doesn't necessarily end there. There are private rooms upstairs, away from the public tables. There, a ruined man might renegotiate what he owes, borrow against his name, or simply try his luck again in quieter company. Fortunes made and lost twice in a single evening, once in public, once in private. Both technically still the Ridotto. That house edge is real, and over a long enough run, it is genuinely unbeatable. But here's where most retellings of this story stop, at the tables themselves. Buy a bank, sit down, let the 8% grind away in your favor, get rich. That's the story. It's also the weakest, most dangerous part of the entire business, the part that gets men killed financially rather than the part that gets anyone rich. An 8% edge is a statistical certainty over 10,000 hands. It is not a certainty over one bad night. Picture a single run of unlucky numbers, a few players hitting that 64 times payout back to back. A Barnabado's entire personal stake, the whole bank, can be gone before dawn. The player only ever risks what he brings to the table. The banker risks everything he's willing to stake against everyone in the room, all at once. That volatility sits entirely on the shoulders of one impoverished nobleman. It never touches the state at all, because the real business isn't the table, it's the license sitting above it. Venice doesn't run a single game itself. It authorizes the palace and the men who hold the banks. In exchange, it takes a percentage of the proceedings, a fixed cut of the house's take, regardless of which Barnabato wins or loses on any given night. Think about what that means for a struggling banker. Even on a night his table loses money, the arrangement with the state doesn't pause to ask how he's doing. The cut is owed on the proceedings the license covers, not on his personal fortune, which is the kind of detail that separates a landlord from a tenant. You can see the whole operation if you put two positions side by side. The banker's position is a wager, 64 times the stake on one spin of Biribi, an edge that only pays off across thousands of hands he has to survive personally. The state's position is a license fee, a guaranteed slice of the total proceedings, collected whether tonight's banker walks away rich or ruined. One of those positions carries real variance, the other carries none at all. The banker is playing the game. The state is renting out the right to play it. 100 bankers can lose everything they own in the same carnival, one after another. The room still turns a profit because the room is never betting on the cards in the first place. Swap out every single banker in the building, ruin them all, replace them with 100 new Barnabati next carnival. The license keeps collecting the same way regardless, because it's never attached to any one of them. That's not a side detail of how the Ridotto works. Historians studying the Republic's own finances are blunt about it. It's the point of the entire institution. So, what can go wrong running one of these tables? Plenty, and Venice's own history remembers who it happened to. Giacomo Casanova writes about the Ridotto directly in his own memoirs. He describes losing entire fortunes at those tables in a single night, then trying to claw them back hours later in the private rooms upstairs. We don't have a surviving ledger with his exact losses written down in ducats. What we do have is his own account of the pattern: ruin, recovery, ruin again, an entire adult life shaped by those tables. The composer Domenico Scarlatti picks up a habit at the gaming tables of Italy that follows him for the rest of his career, described by his own biographers as the one thing that shadowed an otherwise brilliant life. Multiply stories like theirs across a century and a half of carnival seasons, season after season, and you start to understand what the Great Council is looking at by 1774. It isn't only ruined nobles either. Anywhere that much money and that much anonymity mix for 6 months a year, The rest of the city's underworld follows it in. Thieves and pickpockets work the crowds drawn by the tables, and the Ridotto's reputation curdles from fashionable to disreputable long before the final vote. Venice's own heritage records are direct about the reasoning behind the closure. Too many of the city's own nobility find themselves penniless. Not the state, the nobility. Remember Giorgio Pisani from the opening. His motion to the Great Council doesn't dress this up as a financial reform. He frames it as a question of piety, of discipline, of restoring moderate behavior to a republic he believes has lost its grip on both. The council doesn't debate it for long. Picture the chamber itself, robed patricians filling benches that have settled Venice's business for centuries, listening to a case framed entirely around virtue rather than money. When the count comes back, it isn't close. It passes by an overwhelming majority. The record isn't perfectly tidy on which body delivers the final blow. Some accounts credit Pisani's motion in the Great Council directly. Others date the decree to a specific day, the 27th of November, 1774. It's issued by the Council of Ten itself, acting on a request from a body called the Correctors of the Laws. Every version agrees on the year, and every single one agrees on the underlying reasoning. And the reasoning, once you read it closely, is uglier than too much losing. The official complaint isn't just about ruined family fortunes. It names prostitutes and go-betweens operating openly inside the building, and illicit financial dealings between moneylenders and the Barnabati themselves. Sit with that for a moment. The Barnabati are the one group in this entire story the law goes out of its way to keep unmasked and accountable, precisely so they can't hide anything from anyone watching. By 1774, some of them are documented as being tangled up in the kind of shady lending the mask rule exists to prevent among everyone else. The safeguard becomes part of the scandal it's built to stop. Unmasked accountability turning out to be no defense at all against a man desperate enough to cut a quiet deal with the moneylender between hands. Somewhere across the city, at Palazzo Dandolo, the doors that have opened every carnival for 136 years swing shut for the last time, that same year. Closing the building doesn't close the habit. Within a few years, gambling simply migrates back into the private casino it came from in the first place. Tucked into Palazzo ground floors across the city, smaller, quieter, and this time entirely outside the state's reach. Venice spends a century and a half building a door it can watch. The moment that door shuts, the money simply finds 100 smaller doors instead. The palace itself doesn't vanish either. Its rooms survive into the present day as part of a working hotel just off Piazza San Marco. Guests now sleep in the same building where fortunes once changed hands 64 times over on the turn of a single number. The bankers bear all the variance. The players bear all the ruin, and the one party in the entire arrangement who never once puts anything at risk is the government collecting its percentage the whole time. So what does a season running one of these banks look like? Remember, you only get 6 months of carnival a year to make this work before the building goes dark again. A good season has your table surviving its bad nights, the 8% edge grinding forward the way the maths promises. You walk away from carnival with a real profit, your family standing intact for another year. An average season has a few frightening nights where a run of winners nearly empties your bank. You close out barely ahead, or roughly even, having aged considerably in 6 months, but solvent. You've watched the maths threaten to break against you more times than you'd like to count. And you've somehow held your nerve and your bankroll each time. A bad season is the one that happens to a meaningful share of these men. One string of high payouts, 60 times here, 64 times there, and the entire personal stake a Barnabato brings to Carnival is gone by February. Whatever family credit he leans on to raise that stake in the first place goes with it. He doesn't just lose the money. He spends the rest of the year explaining to relatives why the family's one visible source of income just evaporated in a single unlucky week. There's no next Carnival waiting to fix it either, not immediately, since a ruined bank needs fresh capital before it can open again. Fresh capital is precisely what a family in that position no longer has. None of those three outcomes touch the state's own income even slightly. Nobody writes down the exact percentage Venice charges or the total sum that moves through the building in an average carnival. What survives instead is the fact of the arrangement itself and the length of time it runs. Whatever the state's cut is, it's enough for the Republic to keep collecting it across every table, good nights and catastrophic ones alike, for 136 consecutive years. So, who actually gets rich off all this? Run the whole story back and ask who's left standing at the end of it. Not the average Barnabato, gambling his own precarious finances against a room full of nobility every single carnival. Some of them do fine for a season or two, many of them don't. Think back over every colorful story this video has told you so far. The masks, the hot chocolate, the private rooms upstairs. All of it is a story about people losing. Not even the players, despite how the myth remembers this place. Giacomo Casanova writes his own ruin into the historical record himself. The composer, Domenico Scarlatti, carries his habit like a wound for the rest of his life. Only one entity gets rich off the Ridotto consistently for over a century. The Republic of Venice itself. It never sits at a table. It never risks a zecchino. It simply owns the license every table in the building operates under. And it collects, carnival after carnival, regardless of who wins the cards that night. The Republic of Venice itself falls to Napoleon in 1797. Just 23 years after its own government shuts down the casino, it spends a century and a half running. Every one of those 200 family names in the Golden Book loses the only thing that ever makes the book worth having, a state to be patrician in. A Barnabato's whole identity is built on being poor nobility inside a republic that still recognizes nobility as a category. Take away the republic, and the distinction that shapes his entire life stops meaning anything at all. Here's an even stranger confirmation of that lesson. A Scottish financier named John Law spends the years after 1716 running an experiment in the money supply of France. He talks the French crown into backing a national bank issuing paper notes. Then he folds in a giant trading monopoly, the Mississippi Company, promising fortunes from French colonial territory in North America. Shares in his scheme go up several 100% in under 2 years. Paris goes mad for it. Crowds pack a single narrow street, the Rue Quincampoix, day and night. Trading paper certificates like the future itself is for sale there. For a moment, Law's paper wealth is worth something close to the entire annual income of France itself. Then, in 1720, investors try converting that paper back into actual gold and silver, all at once. The whole structure collapses in a matter of months. Law loses his offices, his fortune, and his welcome in France. He spends his last years drifting through European cities before settling in Venice. He dies there in 1729 in reduced circumstances, a man who ran a nation's entire financial system less than a decade earlier. He ends his life an ordinary gambler in the one city that already solves this exact puzzle, a lifetime before he's even born. Owning the operation beats playing the game every time. The institution that finally killed off the Ridotto barely outlives it by more than 2 decades. Surprisingly, the license outlives everything. After a gap of more than a century, the city of Venice opens a new state casino of its own in the 1930s, first out at the Lido Beach Resort. It finally settles into a palace on the Grand Canal in the 1950s. It's still open today, still state-connected, still trading on the fact that Venice invented this business first. Venice loses a war, loses a republic, loses an empire, and somehow never quite lets go of the one thing it built in 1638. Governments, armies, entire political systems rise and fall in this city over 4 centuries. The license, in one form or another, keeps finding a way back. So could you actually get rich owning a Renaissance casino? As a Barnabato, staking your own precarious fortune as the bank, riding a real house edge that can still ruin you in a single unlucky night? Possible, and plenty of noblemen try it. But genuinely fragile, one bad run from losing everything you walk in with, and no guarantee anyone remembers you as anything but a cautionary story afterwards. As the government sitting above every table, holding the license, and taking a fixed cut no matter which way the cards fall. Then, yes, for 136 straight years, without ever once picking up a card, without ever once feeling what a Barnabato felt watching the numbers fall the wrong way. And without ever once caring which masked face walks out of the room richer or ruined. Casanova and Scarlatti prove the player's side of that ledger, one anecdote at a time, across a century and a half of carnival seasons. John Law proves it too in the most ironic way Europe's financial history has to offer. He runs an entire nation's money supply for a few short years. He dies an ordinary gambler in the one city that already knows the answer to the puzzle that ruins him. The Republic of Venice proves the other side quietly, from 1638 all the way to the vote that finally closed it. And then, however loosely, all the way to the casino still running there today. The cards were never the business, the license was.